Moving back on to the list of my top 30 favorite movies, we now hit number 14, and it would be a top 30 favorite movies list without a movie from probably not only my favorite director, but maybe the greatest director of all time, and that is, of course, Steven Spielberg. And, of course, he made one of the biggest movies of all time, and from one of the most influential filmmakers of all time. That's number 14 on my list, 1982's E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. At the time of its release, E.T. was a phenomenon that comes along every once in a while, where it comes out of nowhere and surprises everyone by becoming a classic. It's one of those movies like a Barbie or Who Framed Roger Rabbit or The Avengers, a movie that has so much effort put into it, and it just becomes one of the biggest hit of the year, and no one sees it coming for a long, long mile. It was never expected to be a huge hit at the time of its release, despite the pedigree that Steven Spielberg had built up to that point. I mean, Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Raiders of the Lost Ark. His only real flop was 1941, and even then, that movie wasn't bad at all. It just didn't perform well at the box office, which is a shame because it's actually a pretty fun movie. But we'll eventually delve into that at another point in time. But when this film came out in June of '82, it just took off. It was the #1 movie in America for 16 weekends. 6 of those weekends, consecutive weekends at #1 in the process. And once it was all said and done, and the original theatrical run had ended, the thing made over $350 million domestically, which was unheard of back then in 1982. I mean, this was pretty impressive stuff. And when you add in the re-releases from '85 and 2002, that total has gone up to $430 million since then. So it's still one of the biggest hits of all time. So really, what's kept everybody coming back to this movie? Possibly because E.T. didn't come out on video for a number of years. It came out actually 6 years after the movie was released in theaters, so in 1988. And it was actually because it was one of the first movies to become video pirated. The usual account is that the public in some areas were becoming impatient at long delays getting E.T. to cinemas. So this illegal group realized this, got a hold of a copy of the film with a night by bribing a projectionist, and made a video by projecting it with a sound and video recording device, and that video was used to master off very many copies, which were widely sold illegally. I mean, that's how big it was, but the biggest question of all is, was it all worth it? And I would honestly say it indeed was. But let's go ahead and begin with the story here. Not really that surprising in general, but you have the story of this boy named Elliot, who is very lonely and befriends an extraterrestrial who is stranded on Earth. Elliot and his siblings, played by Robert McNaughton and a very young Drew Barrymore. Like I said, Elliot was played by Henry Thomas, but that's who plays him. They help the extraterrestrial return home while attempting to keep it hidden from their mother, played by Dee Wallace Stone, and the government, led by Keys, in quotation marks, played by Peter Coyote. And it's a story, like I said, it's been done before, but this is the film that was the first to do such a story. And like what usually happens, the film that does it first is usually the best. And, if you're one of those retreads that try to do something that's similar to this, you get something like A Mac and Me, which we talked about on time about the movie's Flashback not too long ago. So what really makes it a good movie? I mean, it's a great mix of a coming-of-age story and a science fiction story, perfectly put together by the writer Melissa Matheson, who was a well-known family film writer at the time, best known for writing The Black Stallion, and she did a really good job of handling the script. You got these likable characters we want to follow. We care about these kids. We care about the mother. We essentially care about what happens to E.T. because they're all such likable characters. You even understand the government's what they're trying to do here. Like, they're the bad guys, but you kind of understand where they're coming from at some points here. Like, and just like, you really do feel like you do get some kind of likelihood towards them. I mean, it's weird to say that, but because they're supposed to be the bad guys, but you kind of understand where they're coming from here, and I think that's something that really makes this all the more special when you really do like a lot of the characters that are involved here. It also works because it's the way the film's shot. What Spielberg decided to do was that he wanted to shoot a film in chronological order to make the emotional performances from the younger actors feel more realistic, and basically the way the film is presented is that it's shot unlike most movies that shoot their scenes in different orders. It's a pretty big move back then for Spielberg to do that, and it actually helps us feel more for the characters as the story goes along. I think it also works because you have the great relationship it builds between Ellie and E.T. It's presented very perfectly on the building relationship the two share, who start off afraid of each other, but slowly but surely come together in the end and share a more powerful connection than we believe it's going to end up being. The film's visuals also play a part in what makes the movie memorable. I mean, do I even need to say why that moon scene is so memorable? It's just so beautifully done. We've seen so many great parodies of it too, and like those effects still hold up to this very day. And I'm not talking about the 2002 effects, which are just abysmally terrible on so many different levels. And we really do not need to delve into that. But the original releases, the visuals in there look pretty good. They still hold up pretty well for the most part. I mean, it just works so very well on that front. I also like it's one of those movies where you really should not be ashamed to actually admit that you teared up as a kid watching it. I know I did. And like even to this day, whenever you hear somebody say that they weren't really crying about it, it's just like people will be just like, how can you not? I mean, who wouldn't start crying with this character you've come to watch and love over the last 2 hours, sitting there on their deathbed, like E.T. Like when he's lying there and nearing death, it's just like it just gets you, man. It still gets me as a grown-up watching it, and it's just so well done, the emotional aspects of the movie. And I think, it goes back to how they shot the film. I think it works very well to the film's advantage. Personally, my favorite scene in the movie is where E.T.'s just walking around the house, watching TV, drinking beer, and while he's just doing stuff around the house, he and Elliot somehow start to have this psychic connection, and both E.T. and Elliot start acting the same way. Like E.T.'s drinking a beer, and Elliot starts getting drunk, and it's just you don't really know why it's happening, but at the same time, you never feel like it's being forced on. It's really like an explained situation. You're just kind of going along with it, and I think it works because the performances just really handled that very well. And do I even need to say anything more about the music by John Williams? I mean, the music by John Williams is just pitch perfect here, and you see why him and Steven Spielberg work so well together. I mean, really, there's not much more I can say about this movie. E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial takes two very different ideas that would have never come together well at the time, a coming-of-age story meeting with a science fiction story. It makes it work so well because you feel for the characters, you get the danger that they're in, you root for the characters all the way through, you like a lot of the people in here, the visuals are just gorgeous to look at, and really, there's not much more I can really say about this movie. It's my personal favorite film from Steven Spielberg. He's made a lot of great movies, and it's rightfully one of the most perfect achievements in film history. It's a well-made film. It's a classic for so many reasons. It's number 14 on my list of my favorite movies of all time, and I don't think I need to say too much more about why that is. E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. So, yeah, that's it for that. So, tune in next week for number 13. Check out what I said last week about my number 15 favorite film, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, as well as take a look at some of the other videos I've done on this particular show featuring my other list of my 30 favorite films. So, with that said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. So until then, take care.